From my perspective, our marriage has been good. We've had some arguments over the years, but nothing serious. I work a 9 to 5, and my wife has never told me she feels lonely, unloved, or bored. She has a routine, driving the kids to school and picking them up, preparing meals, and we spend time together as a family. We go on vacations, trips, holidays, and have regular date nights. I've never suspected she was doing anything behind my. We've always had an open phone policy, but I can barely remember the last time I checked her phone. Then, this past Wednesday, I came home, and while parking, I overheard her talking to someone on the phone, saying she missed them and couldn't wait to see them later that week. She hung up right after saying this. When I asked who she was talking to, she said it was a friend who was currently on a trip. I didn't suspect anything at first, as I knew her friend was indeed away, but something felt off. She was acting overly cheerful and affectionate that day, more than usual, which gave me a strange feeling. The next day at work, I couldn't shake the thought of her ending that call so abruptly. When I called her, she said she was at home, but I could hear noise in the background. I started to believe she was cheating. I left work, drove home, but she wasn't there. I called her again and asked her to check something at the house to avoid suspicion. She acted as if she was at home, but I knew she wasn't. When I got back, she was her usual self, sweet and wanting to spend time with the kids and me. I remained calm, pretending to be tired. I told my best friend everything that night, and he urged me to confront her immediately. But without proof, I decided to check her phone and laptop after she went to sleep. When I did, I found everything. She hadn't deleted the messages, just hidden them. The guy she's involved with is younger than me, somewhere between 23 to 27. He's from Europe, well off, and seems like a player type, showing off his wealth and partying online. He's attractive, and apparently, that was enough for her to risk everything. They've been physical at least 4 to 5 times, mostly when I was at work or when she claimed to be with her friends. She initiated most of the contact and meetings. I've kept this to myself so far, but I'm planning to confront her today. I know I want a divorce, and I'll be contacting a lawyer. My biggest concern is that we live on a different continent, and I fear she may try to take the kids back to her country. Everything is in my name: our house, cars, and a significant amount of savings in our joint account. I also own a house and property in my home country, given to me by my grandparents during the marriage. I can't stand to be near her anymore. Should I confront her? Should I talk to the other guy? I'm considering getting a DNA test for the kids, even though I'm almost certain they're mine. Any advice on what to do next is appreciated. So my last update was when I was staying at a hotel. That night, my wife's best friend called to say she'd be with my kids. We've always had a good relationship, and I trust her. Early Wednesday morning, she called again, telling me that my wife was in tears and couldn't stop crying, so she'd taken the kids to school. I immediately got in the car, picked up my friend, who was also a witness, and went to my house. Surprisingly, kicking my wife out was easier than I expected, although it took about 2 hours. She cried, begged for forgiveness, said she'd explain everything, screamed, and then begged again. She wouldn't listen to her friend, my lawyer, or even me. I told her that if she didn't leave, I'd call the police and do everything in my power to have her deported. Still, she refused to go, insisting we talk. So I lied. I told her to leave so I could have some space to think and that I'd call her later. I just wanted her off the property. She eventually left with some clothes and has been staying with her best friend ever since. That day, I took care of a lot of things. I changed the locks on the house and the gates, cut her off from anything in my name that she used, and hired a babysitter named Melody. I found her through a recommendation from a coworker who no longer needed her. Melody's great. She's from Asia, speaks fluent English and the local language, can drive, cook, clean, and has no criminal record. So I hired her. I also had myself and the kids tested for STDs. When my kids asked where their mom was, I told them we'd be separated for now. They had some questions, but when I told them they could talk to or see her whenever they wanted, they seemed okay with it. They met Melody and were comfortable around her. Meanwhile, my wife called and messaged me nonstop. Thursday brought more chaos. After dropping the kids off at school, I returned home to work on the computer while Melody did chores. Then I've had a call from the principal of my son's school. Apparently, my wife had shown up, asking to see our older son during class, and security had stopped her. She made a scene, saying she hadn't seen the kids in 2 days. I rushed over, taking 30 minutes to get there. During that time, the principal called again, saying she and the school psychologist had contacted Child Protective Services, CPS, claiming it was the law in cases like this. It's not. When I arrived, my wife again begged me to talk, cried, and caused a scene in front of the school staff. The principal and the CPS worker accused me of stealing the kids from their mother. I was shocked. My wife, to her credit, defended me, saying I hadn't taken the kids or stopped her from seeing them, but that I had kicked her out of the house. She insisted she just wanted to come back home and would do anything to make things right. Despite this, the principal and the CPS worker continued to attack me, even suggesting my wife call the police because they assumed I had kicked her out aggressively and without cause. I'd had enough. I called my lawyer, who told me not to say a word until he arrived. My wife explained everything to them, what had happened in our lives, the affair, and how she wanted me to forgive her. They all sided with her, offering their support. I was speechless. At one point, she tried to hug or kiss me, and when I pushed her away, the CPS worker accused me of showing clear signs of an abuser. I nearly lost it, but stayed silent. My wife again defended me, saying I had never raised my voice or hand to her, and that she was at fault, but still loved me. Before my lawyer arrived, another CPS worker showed up, just as hostile as the first. They both acted like I was the villain, while my wife played the innocent victim. When my lawyer finally got there, he was furious. He laid out all the facts about me, about my wife's situation, about our immigration status. He pointed out that she didn't work, had no place to live, and was at risk of deportation. He also made it clear that the CPS workers were acting illegally and that this situation was not within their jurisdiction. As he spoke, my wife realized he was my divorce lawyer and started attacking him, calling him heartless and cruel. The principal asked both of us to leave the office while they discussed things inside. In the hallway, my wife continued crying and trying to talk to me. I just stood there, watching the security guard, who looked like he was trying not to laugh at the absurdity of it all. The principal left the office to bring my kids. My older son asked what was going on, and I just told him to answer their questions and nothing more. A few minutes later, we were called back into the office. The CPS worker smugly said they'd gotten all the important details from the kids. When I asked what details, she replied that both my sons said they wanted to stay with me and enjoyed being with me. They repeated the same in front of me and my wife. Once again, my wife broke down in tears, and my older son even shifted away when she tried to hug him. After that, the CPS workers told us we needed to come to an agreement regarding custody. I told them I'd deal with that once everything else was sorted. They then handed me a document to sign, which was in the local language. I took a moment to read it, but my lawyer immediately grabbed it and advised me not to sign. The CPS workers had tried to get me to sign something that would allow them to visit my home every week, unannounced, to monitor how things were going with the kids. My lawyer ripped into them, accusing them of doing this to earn bonuses and explaining that they had no legal right to demand such access. He told them they could contact whoever they wanted, but we weren't signing anything. They threatened to reach out to their supervisors and said the police might get involved. I left immediately, and so far, no one has contacted me. As I was leaving, my wife chased after me, begging again for us to talk, but I just drove away. Later, when my kids came home, I sat down with them to discuss everything that had happened. They told me they'd heard my wife crying and begging after I sent her that message on Tuesday, so they knew it was her fault. They're smart kids. I took them to football practice while my daughter stayed with Melody, who she's really taken to. My sons even helped Melody clean up after dinner, which they never did for their mom, so I think they understand in their own way that they need to step up and behave during this difficult time. Meanwhile, my wife continues calling and messaging nonstop. If there were a Guinness World Record for the most calls and messages, she'd win it hands down. Today has been much calmer. Everything at school went smoothly, and my daughter stayed home as she had a day off. Melody braided her hair, and they sang together. So far, They make a great team. In the afternoon, my wife's best friend called, saying my wife wanted to see the kids. I agreed, and they came over. My wife immediately noticed that I had changed the gate. My daughter was excited to see her, and my wife started crying as soon as she did. She was waiting for my sons, but when they arrived, they both told her they didn't want to spend time with her. I encouraged them to at least talk to her for a bit, as she was crying in the street, but they refused and went to their room and later outside to play with friends. I asked my wife to leave, but she begged again for a chance to explain everything. I told her we wouldn't talk until I received the DNA test results. She froze, staring at me for about 10 seconds, and for a moment, I genuinely thought the kids might not be mine. She was shocked, insisting the kids were mine and saying she couldn't believe I'd think otherwise. It seemed like that was the moment she finally realized the gravity of what she'd done. She repeated that the kids were mine, then jumped into her car. I spoke briefly with her friend, who told me my wife was crying uncontrollably as they left. Later, her friend brought my daughter back and told me my wife had locked herself in her bedroom. She called her parents to confess everything and was in shock that I'd tested the kids for paternity. According to her friend, my wife insisted the kids are mine and that she never looked at anyone else during our marriage except for her affair partner. She's now overwhelmed by the realization that I no longer trust her, and the DNA test pushed her over the edge. Her parents also called me. To say they were furious would be an understatement. Her mother begged me not to cut them off from the kids, and I assured her they could visit and call, but I wouldn't allow the kids to leave Asia before we divorce. She agreed and thanked me. Her father, on the other hand, was done with her. He told me she was no longer welcome in their home and that they were disgusted by her actions. He even told her not to contact them anymore. Her older brother said the same. He's blocked her and wants nothing to do with her, expressing his disgust that she's his sister. They all gave me their full support and asked me to keep them updated. They even FaceTimed with the kids, and they seemed to have a good time. That's about it for now. I'm hoping the weekend will be less stressful. I'm mentally and physically drained. Tomorrow, we're going to watch a football game with my friend's family, and hopefully my wife will leave me in peace. Since I mentioned the DNA tests, she hasn't called me, so at least that's some relief. Now I'm just waiting for the results. My younger son's 7th birthday is next Saturday, and dealing with my wife at his party will be another big headache, but it's something I'll have to manage. Thanks again for all your advice and kind words.